Hello. I have the very difficult task to do the first presentation after lunch. So I hope you had enough coffee, and even the guys in the back are not going to get asleep. So I will try to do my best for that. So my name is Jean-Baptiste Kempf. I am the president of the VideoLAN non-profit organization. I am the lead developer of VLC since too long. I'm 31 years old, I'm French, and I'm trying to do cool things on my free time. So the main object of this presentation is going to be the VideoLAN project. The projects that will make the cones win over the world. And I'm going to tell you a short story that starts a long time ago. So if you look closely on this picture, you're going to see the École Centrale Paris, which is a university, grande école in south of Paris. And this is where the VideoLAN project starts. So in the 1960s, the École Centrale Paris, who is in Paris, has to move away because they need to be bigger. And the École Centrale Paris is one of the only grande écoles in France who depends on the Ministry of Education and not one of the other industry or defense. And so they don't have money. So it's the École Centrale Paris, so they go and say, okay, we're going to relocate you in the middle of France, near Clermont-Ferrand. And so the alumni of the École Centrale Paris said, no, you're not going to do that. And they say, well, we don't have the money, so we're going to do that. Well, the alumni goes around and they just take a lot of money, and with this money they bought a piece of land next to the Parc de Sceaux that you can see on the right of the picture. And they say to the school, hey, you know, we build a piece of land, build your school, the big square thing at the top, and yeah, build it here. Don't worry, I'm still speaking about VLC. This is the reason why you have VLC, so it's quite funny. But what it happens is that the ministry only has the big building, and everything else is owned by the alumni. And therefore, when they built, and when Bouygues built all the small residence for the students, they put the network in the 1980s, but it was always managed by students, and notably by a non-profit organization of the students that was wiring and doing stuff. So the problem was that in the 1980s, IBM put it a very nice and fast network called Token Ring. Who knows what Token Ring is? Yeah, quite a few. So it's great, Token Ring. The only problem is that you change every computer, so the more computer you add, the worse the latency is, which is very fine in the 1980s or 1990s, but if you try to play Doom, it is horrible because you get fragged. And this is one of the main problem of a university campus network. You need to frag the others and not get fragged, right? So they go and see the school, hey, do you want to buy a new network for us? We are in 1993. And they say, well, oh, I'm sorry. This is not our piece of land. It's not our buildings. We cannot do anything. Sorry. And of course, they went to see other people and say, well, what are you going to do? I mean, the web, there is no web, or almost no web at that time, so a 10 megabits network is enough. So the students are really not pleased. At some point, they go and they meet with Bouygues, and at the meeting there is some guy from TF1 and says, okay, so we are working on the TV by satellite, and basically it's digital, so if you're able to take your TV from the satellite and restream it on the network, and therefore destroy your network, we will pay you a new one. Deal. So that's 1994. The first Pentium MMX 60 megahertz is here. YouTube is not there for 10 years, and so doing software decoding on PCs of MPEG-1 or mostly MPEG-2 video was completely crazy, but they did it. So this is how the VideoLAN project started. So they did the video streaming in 1995, 1996. They finished the project in 1997. It was great. You were able to stream 30 seconds of video. Well, basically because after 35 seconds, the memory was full and the computer would crash. But that was enough. So they had a new network, and they were pleased. So in 1998, they decided that it was a cool project, but they could do it better, and so they restarted it and changing a few stuff. The main idea is that they wanted to be open source, everything open source. They wanted to have it cross-platform. Be careful, we are speaking about working on BOS and Linux, nothing else. And being network-oriented. And it was a student project done by the students. So supposedly the school was in charge, but of course the student project were 150 hours per year. This is usually what the students would spend in 2 or 3 weeks. There are students that have spent their years on VLC, but it was always a student project that was from year to year. So every year there were new students that came and took over the project. So VideoLAN. VideoLAN projects made a lot of software projects. Of course, one of the most known is VideoLAN client, who became VLC, but we had many others, stuff like VideoLAN server, of course, some really weird broadcasting project to do multicast over a broadcast network using VLANs, and lots of libraries that we use in VLC to break DVDs, encryption, to play Dolby, to play DTS, to play MPEG-2 audio and video. We have also one of the most used H.264 encoder that was started at the École Centrale Paris, X264. It's basically now the only H.264 encoder used on the cloud. YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, even Apple now is using it. And we have also lots of other libraries, a video editing software, a new server that is able to, well, do stuff, and so many others. So this is the original VideoLAN solution. So you had, of course, a client and a server. The servers could be VLS, the server, or VLC. The client that was able to do transcoding, so you could take any input, including the satellite dishes, which was the main idea in the beginning, and stream it to clients, which is mostly VLC. Well, it's quite important to know that everything that is done by the VideoLAN project is done by volunteers. We are speaking here of actually a bazaar. I mean, we are very far from people like Mozilla or people from like Google Android, who basically do open source, but it's a big company behind it, right? We do stuff in the most bizarre way. People come, people go, they send patches, and we accept the patches depending on the quality of the patch and not because we need the feature or not. This is quite important because that's what we've done since a long time. We now meet once or twice a year, mostly in September, usually in Paris, but sometimes not. And we use only open source tools to do collaboration. Everything, we refuse to use anything that is not open source, including cloud tools. Any cloud tool that is not open source is not used by the project, because if we don't do that, then there is always, you start doing that, and where do you put the limit? The VLC contributor is very small. The core team is 4 or 5 people. The people who consider themselves as VLC developers is maybe 10 to 20 people. And then we have a lot of contributors, and usually every year it's between 100 and 200 contributors, which makes us a very large project. The number of commits per day is basically between 10 and 50. So that's quite high. It's quite small when you compare to the Linux kernel, of course, but it's almost the size of what's happening on Mozilla Firefox, for example. The core decisions are taken on IRC. You know, it's like Google Plus, but from 20 years ago, or Facebook or Messenger. I don't know what you use. Everything, all the decisions are done on mailing lists by a kind of consensus. The people who have more commits have more rights than the ones who don't. So yeah, we are mostly on the right side of the picture. It's also important to know that there are not many software of that side that are still using a complete bazaar decision submodel. So now we have a non-profit organization. You can see that it's only since 2009. It's quite late compared to the size of the project and the history. But it's just like before, it was just managed by the students of the École Centrale Paris, and now it's not anymore. And the members are mostly VLC core developers and also people who want. We don't have any money. We just get donation on our website, and this is used to buy a GPU or ship us to some conferences overseas. But most of the time it's to buy a new GPU because there is a driver that is broken and we need to test it. So, I've spoken a bit about VideoLAN. I'm going now to speak about VLC. VLC is what you could call the cone player, so I'm very pleased to see that a lot of you are using VLC. A lot of people don't know VLC. When I say, what are you doing? Yeah, I work on VLC. Yeah, the small cone that plays video. Oh, yeah, that, yeah, great. So it was a complete stupid decision done by students that were too young. It's a genius decision to take the cone because it's so fucking different than everything else, and you just always realize what it is. Yeah, this is a video file. We had lots of marketing companies that came in. We are going to redesign your logo. Never happened, and it will not. So why is VLC and why VLC got popular? The first reason is because we are French, and so we don't care about software patents, and so we play everything. So at this time, you could play DVDs, you could play any codec without having to install codec packs. On macOS, it was the only way to play DVDs, to break decryption. We play a lot of files, a lot of broken files also, which is quite important for people. And also, as I explained in the beginning, we are a network player. Why is it important? Well, in 2002 and 2003, there was some stuff called eMule, eDonkey, and stuff, and other peer-to-peer software. And the biggest problem is that you were going to download a movie, which was 700 megabytes, and well, you wouldn't know if it was the right movie until you've downloaded everything, which would cost you 1 day or 2 days of downloading, right? So that's bad. So VLC is a network player, right? So VLC is known because on a network, you cannot expect the file to be complete, and you get bit by bit. So VLC worked around for all the formats to be able to play it on a network. So VLC doesn't need the metadata that is at the end of the file to play the file. So if you were downloading a Disney movie, you would get, and after like 10 or 20 megabytes, you were able to see if it was actually a Disney movie and not a porn movie. Or vice versa, right? So that's quite funny that VLC got popular because of that, because it was simple. There was no marketing behind it, so it just plays file. And if VLC cannot play a file, it won't be able to play it. You could add any count of codecs packs and so on. We are independent from the system, so it just works. And also VLC works everywhere, from Windows to Macs and Linux, of course. Our latest version has been ported to OS2, so that's quite an achievement. I think that the 2 users are very happy. What I'm not sure is there any user besides the developers? We've ported, of course, on the mobile platforms, Android, iOS. We're working on Windows Phone. We have VLC in many set-top boxes, and we're working with other people to do that. And I expect that this is going to happen more with Android TV around. VLC is around 900,000 to 1 million downloads per day. Since we counted on our website, it's more than 1.5 billion. And of course, we don't count Linux distribution. We don't count download.com, télécharger.fr, and all those websites, because as our software is free, in all the sense of free, you can redistribute. It's installed on 1 every 6 Mac. It's in the top 15 applications used on Windows that is not from Microsoft. If there is anyone from Microsoft, hi. Yeah, and VLC can play a lot of things, especially DVDs, Blu-ray, network stream, DVB card, ISI, webcams, and everything that is basically playing video. So I'm going to give you a few nice screenshots, very modern. This is important because this is the first screenshot of VLC playing a DVD, which is, as you have seen, of course, GoldenEye. And this is the reason why all the VLC code names are based from GoldenEye movie until the version 1.0. This is also a very old version of VLC using GTK on a GNOME 2.2. That's almost 10 years ago now. The first version on the Mac with a nice aqua look. This is the version that most people try to use and started to use. That's based on WX widgets. This is on the GNOME 2.18. And this is a version that stayed for a long time before we changed to a new interface using Qt. This is the more modern Mac version. And this is the first version where we were using Qt on Windows. And of course, this is the best version because it's the last one and because it has ponies, and so it's better. So this is on GNOME 3, I guess. So I'm now going to speak just a bit of technique. I'm sorry to everyone told you that VLC exists. VLC does not exist. VLC is just 200 lines of code, very small wrapper around libVLC. VLC is not a media player. VLC works exactly like every other multimedia framework, which is building at runtime a graph of module to be able to play any file. VLC works like that, so we have a very small wrapper around our core. So our core is libVLC core, and our API is libVLC. As you can see, we are very good at names. And then you have lots of modules, and every module is run at runtime, loaded at runtime to give the right capability and to support the right codec. This is very important because this is one of the reasons why VLC won compared to other monolithic software, like, for example, on Linux, MPlayer, because everyone can arrive and just do one module and go away. And you don't have to understand everything that is going inside the core in order to work on VLC. So if someone wanted to add a support for a format that no one cares about, or wanted to port on VLC on a platform that no one cares about, like OS2, you can just do the right modules. It's also very good because you can take the best capability of the platform. So you're not going to use OpenGL on another platform because it sucks on Windows, for example, and you don't want that. So you're going to use Direct3D. And on Mac, well, if you want to render fonts, you're going to use Cortex or Quartz, not FreeType, and so on and so on. So this was the reason why they did that was because of memory constraint in 1990s, and because one of the guys thought it was a good idea, but the reason after was it made VLC popular, and they didn't plan that. So the architecture is very simple. We have a very small core. The core does not know anything about video. It is just able to load modules, take care of memory, take care of threads, and do the synchronization with a clock. And above that, there is a VLC, libVLC, so you can build your applications. Number of lines of code, the core is probably 100,000 lines of code. With all the modules, it's around 800,000. So that's quite big, but not that much. But we use something like 50 external libraries. And when you compile all of them, it's more around 10 million lines of code, which starts to be a quite sizable software. We code everything in C object, which is a kind of abuse of C to get some object. Lots of pointer to functions inside structs and link to opaque structs. Pretty cool because it's very portable and you don't have the headaches of C++ ABIs to manage. And as I explained, it's a network-oriented software. So if you look at the graph, you're going to see that everything looks more or less simple. You got a protocol, which is HTTP or file, so you can get the stream, then you have a format that is MKV, MOV, AVI, or so on. And it's going to split them into different decoders, one for subtitle, one for video, one for audio, and then render it on the screen. The only difference is that the first two arrows are on the wrong way. Because when you go on YouTube, what's happening is that the client is going to download as much as possible, and then the server is going to say, oh, this guy is asking too much. So they are going to do very complex stuff on the server side to block the download. But basically, if you're not going to watch everything, well, the download has been wasted. VLC does not work like that. VLC has a constant buffer at the beginning in milliseconds. And so when you play the file, the MKV demuxer is going to say, well, I need more, and then you're going to do just a constant buffer of 1 second or 2 seconds. And this is very different from what you have usually with YouTube and so on, but it's very good to do streaming, and it's very respectful from the bandwidths. I'm going to show you a few funny stuff about VLC. Yeah. We can do a lot of stuff with VLC, of course, content integration. This is not really funny. Screencasting, amazing. Only to do this picture, and no one uses it to do anything else. But basically, you can screencast everything you're playing. You can do mosaic. So if you're in France and you use Free, for a long time there was this mosaic. It's done by VLC. And that's where you realize that VLC is not a player, because you need to play 16 files at the same time, decode them, merge them, and then re-encode them and restream it. We can do, of course, picture-in-picture. Wall filter, very nice if you don't want to spend 10,000 euros to buy a wall. You can put a VLC. One is full screen, and everything is synchronized on the network based on the timestamps. So that's pretty cool. We support encryption, decryption. Of course, I already said that we can decrypt the DVDs. We can also encrypt in many formats, mostly for HTTPS and satellite. We support karaoke, because why not? And we support MIDI, of course, because who doesn't need a MIDI player in 2014? Of course, you can use VLC without a screen, so we have a console control. We have, of course, the famous libcaca, which is the way to play movies in ASCII art. I would like to point that this is only ASCII art and not Unicode, right? So it's really based on ASCII. And if you're very far, it's okay. Very good to debug a video from SSH connection. We have a web interface, so you can play, you have your machine, and everything is either stream or play directly inside the browsers. And we've been pushing a lot on VLC on Android lately. So we launched it 2 years ago now. It was not very beautiful at the beginning, but you had everything you wanted. And we've been developing quite a bit and to make it a bit nicer. But so this is the current version that is going to change soon, because we finally matched the Android style of 2 years ago, and they changed it again. But we're working on it. We also are on VLC on iOS. And we also, like on Android, we can do hardware decoding, multi-core decoding, and play every type of file. On those OSs, it's really cool that you have VLC, because you can play all the crazy file, and for the ones that are important, you fall back to the hardware decoding. What are we going to work on? We are working a lot on Windows 8, Windows RT, Windows Phone, Xbox. We're working on porting to Chrome OS and other. We are not going to port to Firefox OS because I'm not going to port VLC on a JavaScript platform with no thread. And same for Ubuntu Phone. Depends if they're going to open it or not. Contribute. So you should contribute to VLC, all of you. The first way to contribute is use it. The second one is to report bugs. And then if you have more time, is just translations, code on VLC, or use VLC on your next project, mostly because you're not going to use VLC, but the VLC engine on your next app for Android, on iOS, or on your next set-top box. Thank you. If you have questions, we have 5 minutes.